All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to explore a really powerful way of looking at courage in the face of one of our biggest anxieties, the fear of death. We'll be drawing on some fascinating writings from theologians Richard Baxter and Stephen Yost. So, right off the bat, the material hits us with a pretty challenging question. This deep fear that so many of us feel. Is it something that just happens to us from the outside? Or is it maybe a wound that we're actually inflicting on ourselves? This single idea is really at the heart of everything we're going to talk about today.
And to help us wrap our heads around this, the source uses this powerful metaphor. It doesn't describe the fear of death as just some vague shadow. No, it calls it an active internal thief that sneaks into our lives to steal the things that matter most.
So for our first section, let's unpack that. What exactly is this thief and what does it take from us? Because this isn't just some abstract concept. The argument here is that it has very, very real consequences for how we live our lives every single day.
The source even gives this internal struggle a name: self-created suffering. I mean, think about that. The implication is that while death itself is a reality, the constant torment we feel thinking about it, that's something we build and maintain inside our own minds. In a way, we become, as the text says, the executioners of our own calamities. Wow.
So what's in the thief's bag? What does it actually steal? Well, the list is just devastating. It goes after our conscience and our courage, which leaves us feeling timid. It robs us blind of comfort and peace of mind, replacing it with a constant humming anxiety. And maybe worst of all, it steals our ability to just feel joy in the here and now.
And just listen to this quote. It really shows you how aggressive this fear is. It's not passive. The source paints this picture of a predator that is actively attacking our inner strength. It's scratching and clawing at the very core of who we are.
Okay, so that's a pretty bleak picture, right? But the source doesn't just leave us there in the dark. It starts to build a counter-narrative. And it does that by showing us this incredible example of courage from the disciple Thomas.
This is the moment everything pivots. They're facing almost certain danger in Judea. Jesus' life is on the line, and Thomas says this. It's not a statement of despair, but one of unbelievable loyalty.
And this is the key, right? How you interpret that line. The source argues this is not some death wish, it's not fatalism, it is the ultimate act of commitment. Thomas's loyalty to Jesus was just so much stronger than his own instinct to survive. His courage literally silenced that thief of fear inside him.
Now, building on that incredible example, the source then shifts gears a little bit. It starts to logically just dismantle fear itself. It makes the case that when you really think about it, this anxiety is completely, totally useless.
And this comparison here lays it out perfectly. I mean, on the one hand, look at what fear does to us. It multiplies bitterness, it traps our soul, and it creates this nonstop torment. But then, look at the reality of what it can't do. It has zero power to delay death, it can't prevent suffering, it can't change the outcome one bit, it is all cost and zero benefit.
And the stakes here are so high. The text warns that this kind of paralyzing fear is so corrosive that it can actually make a person abandon their deepest beliefs. When you're truly tested, when you're facing the gallows, so to speak, fear can make you deny everything you ever stood for. So, if fear is this destructive, useless thief, what's the alternative? Well, this next section gets into the solution, a radical reframing of how we look at death itself. The source actually proposes a pretty clear path forward. First, you have to consciously decide to ignore the lies that fear is whispering in your ear. Second, you actively prepare yourself with what it calls spiritual armor. Third, you shift your focus away from earthly terrors and towards what the text calls heavenly bliss. And finally, and this is a big one, you remember that death is a trodden path.
And that last point is just captured so beautifully in this quote. So much of our fear of death is a fear of the unknown, of walking a path all alone. But the source offers this incredible comfort. It is not an untrodden path. For a believer, it's a journey Christ has already made, making it sacred and taking away that terror of the unknown.
So what's the result of all this? What happens when you adopt this new perspective? Well, it's not some grim acceptance of your fate. It's actually a life of joyful contentment. It's about making a fundamental shift away from worrying about the quantity of your days to focusing on their quality.
And this is what that looks like in practice. It's a call to just accept the time you've been given, to stop grumbling about what you wish was different, and to pour all that energy into your purpose. The big question in life changes from, how long do I have, to, how have I used the time I was given?
And that really brings us to the central message of this whole thing. A short life lived with purpose and depth and sweetness is worth so much more than a long life lived in bitterness and fear. The value of a life isn't measured in years, but in its substance.
So we end up right back where we started, with a question. After exploring this idea that fear is a thief we let in, that real courage is about commitment, and that death is a path already walked, we're kind of left to wonder, aren't we? What if our greatest fear is also our greatest illusion? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.